Jason came back to get even, vowing to kill every teenager in the area.
Hey, you forgot the Power Glove!
And welcome to our second 2018 actually posted on or right before Halloween episode of Retrovaniacs. As always, I'm Jeremy Parmentier here with Billy Holiday.
Hello there.
And Jeremy Gregory.
The spookiest of Jeremys.
It is. And this is the spookiest of episodes. None of us are allowed to miss as we cover two NES horror classics. But until we dive in to Freddy vs. Jason 2018, Jeremy, what have you been playing since our last episode?
I continue to play Forza a lot. That is really the new Forza Horizon 4. That's really my go-to game at night. That's just something I can sit down and do a few races, do my weekly tournaments and stuff like that. We're back on spring at this point, I believe, since the last podcast when we were on winter. So things have changed dramatically. But yeah, I've really been playing a lot of Forza Horizon 4. That, like I said, it's my go-to game. But also the new Call of Duty came out, and I apologize to everyone that's listening to this podcast. But yes, I am a big fan of Call of Duty. I get it every year, and I try not to talk about it too much on this podcast, but it is really about the only first-person shooter that I'm good at and that I can still play. So I generally get that every year. So this is the new Black Ops this year. We're up to 4. I've always been a big fan of the Black Ops series. Those are kind of the high points of the series for me. Black Ops 1 and 2. Genuinely two of my favorite multiplayer games of all time, and 3 wasn't bad, but I was really hoping that this one would maybe continue bring back some of the older stuff, and just reinvigorate why I enjoy Call of Duty, because it's been several years that I've just kind of been playing it and just going with it, and I like it and everything, but it hasn't quite hit that high of Black Ops 1 and 2 for me since then. But this one is quite good. They have completely just tossed out the single player. They're just like, screw that shit. Nobody plays it anyway. And they've kind of replaced it with several different multiplayer modes. You've got the same old multiplayer that you've had in just about every Call of Duty ever in this one. Team Deathmatch, Hardpoint, Domination, all that kind of crap. It's still here. But you've also got the zombies. That's back. But the big one this year is the new Breakout mode, which is their attempt at Battle Royale. Now, I have to ask both of you, have either of you tried any of these newfangled Battle Royale games?
My son got me into Fortnite, and I think that's dead. I mean, I think that craze is over now. I believe, at least. Or I'm just out of touch, probably. I played it a little bit, enjoyed it once I knew what I was doing, but am shit at building. Like, I would have my 4 walls put up by the time I turn around, and the person I'm in a shootout with has got a fucking mansion constructed, and I just never any good at it. That's why I was kind of excited for this, this Battle Royale version, because there's no building. It's all just run and gun or hide and gun, as I often do. Yeah, and I've played this one on Black Ops 4. It's more my speed. I think it's certainly a lot slower paced, and like I said, there's no building in it whatsoever. I don't know. I'm just not a gigantic fan. Like, it's never going to be the mode on Black Ops 4 that I spend a lot of time playing. It's kind of just play one match here and there. And Fortnite I could handle in small doses also. I don't know. I don't get the overall appeal of it, I guess.
And yeah, that's really just about how I feel with it, because if there's one game that Battle Royale is going to click with me, it's going to be Call of Duty. And it does seem like it's a really well done mode in this one. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it is still that style of gameplay. And all I want to do is just run around and loot everything. Mm-hmm. And that's it. and then get killed. I rarely ever see anyone to kill. Maybe that's just the way I play these games. I just don't play them right. I just don't get it, maybe. But every single time I try to play one, whether it's PUBG, Fortnite, it's always the same. It's just one of those things. I think I don't get it, and I don't think I want to learn why I don't get it. But yeah, that's really what I've been playing.
I have not tried anything like that because it sounds like it's not a game where you hunt monsters. If it is a game where you hunt monsters, there's a good chance that I played it in the last 2 weeks. There's a new arch-tempered fight out. It's actually one of the fights I don't care for in the game. When you first get through the story mode, there is kind of a midpoint where you do the what the hell is it called? Zora Magdaros, which is kind of like a long single-player event. You can't really fly through it. It takes a little bit of time. Anyway, this is the arch-tempered Zora Magdaros, which means it's harder. You have to do more fighting of Nergigante on there, and I've already lost all of our listeners. So the other thing I've been playing is Hollow Knight. I've been playing a lot of Hollow Knight. We talked about the last 2 weeks. It's a lot like, last episode we talked about Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and this definitely is the next. It's basically like just switching to a different Castlevania Symphony of the Night. I love it. I've been playing pretty much nothing but that whenever I have a chance, when I'm not fighting some sort of monster. And there's lots of things I want to play. I want to start playing The Missing, but I haven't bought it yet. But I probably need to buy it quick because pretty soon I'm going to be playing Red Dead Redemption 2, and that's going to take over everything. But yeah, Hollow Knight. Again, highly recommend it. Keeps getting better and better. And the version on PS4 has all the DLC that was out before. So there's all this, what would be considered extra stuff that you don't know is extra. So that's like I'm going back to areas I've been to and fighting bosses over again. And it's great. I love it. But Billy, what have you been playing?
Well, I've been playing a little bit of Black Ops 4, just a little bit here and there. And I think I echo the same sentiments Jeremy had for it pretty much in terms of how I feel about the series, kind of where I think it's dropped off and whatnot. I've been playing a lot of that damn Mario Odyssey, and I don't know when it's going to end. They have, ever since the 64, there have always been the kind of the items to collect, whether stars or, the sunshine you were collecting also. This one has you collecting these power moons. And I got pretty excited because I hit 100. Well, no, that's not the end of the game. You just keep going. It's not even close. And I think I finished the game with about 160 of them. And afterwards you're free to roam as you please. And I just keep collecting them, and it never ends. And I'm at 401 right now. And I just found out, much to my horror, there are 999 of these things. So needless to say, I'm still have some time to put into this Mario Odyssey. Can't say enough good things about it. I haven't been back home to get hold of my Xbox, but I am going to definitely give that Forza a try. Probably later next year when I get done playing Red Dead Redemption 2, which I am going to. It's preloaded now. It's ready. I will probably be up midnight Friday, even though I might not be. And I'm so excited for that one.
Well, it does seem like we could summarize the entire first 10 minutes of the show by saying we're all playing the same thing we were playing last episode. But that's okay. I think we brought some new angles to the discussion. But what's more important than what we've been playing that's a new game is what have we been playing that is an old game. And this week, that is two different games. The Nintendo Entertainment System version of both Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street.
I'm telling you, I think I'm the only one that was excited of the three of us about this selection. I can't think of a better couple games, obviously, to pull up for this Halloween episode. I don't know if they are considered classics, like we always say at the beginning of every episode. But yeah, these were certainly two games that I dumped a lot of time into growing up. Two games I had rented several times, eventually would just buy outright. But yeah, and two movie series that I deeply love. Have watched several entries from each respective series already this month. I'm sure we'll get more in depth in each individual series as we go along. But yeah, I was geared up for this one. I remember Friday the 13th. I remember liking it, but finding it to be a little obtuse as far as where you're going. And this is one that when I beat it, I couldn't tell you how I did it. Nightmare on Elm Street, I always remember being, just the better of the two. But I hadn't played it in so long, so I was looking forward to go back to it and seeing if it still held up for me.
And I've never played either of them back in the day or ever tried them, actually. I'm sure my actual first experience with them was watching Video Game Nerd episodes on YouTube way back in the day where he featured those games. And I back when I was a kid, I generally stayed away from those kinds of games because I wasn't a big fan of horror movies because I'm not good with horror movies. I'm still not good with them today or any sorts of games like that just because of the anxiety that I have. It's very hard to play them. So I didn't really play those back then because I didn't know how scary they were, which sounds dumb, saying that now. How scary can an NES game be? But, as a kid, you really didn't know. And those movies, Friday the 13th and Nightmare on those were like the peak of the scariest things any child could ever see back in the 80s. And so I stayed away from those, and I have until this podcast.
Yeah, I played Friday the 13th. You guys, we often talk about what games we rented or memories of renting games. This is one of the few games I can remember specifically renting, getting it home and after about 10 minutes being like, what have I wasted my time with? It didn't come with any instruction manual at all, not even one of those cards that kind of gave you a few moves here and there, just a case and a game, like a rental case and a game. And I didn't figure it out, but we still played it, all weekend. And I assumed I was getting close to finishing it, but in 2018 I found out that is not true at all. I was nowhere near finishing this game. And I had never played Nightmare on Elm Street. It came out later, not much later, but late enough that I had kind of moved on to other systems. And I don't know why, and maybe it's just me, but when I saw any game that was a 4-player push on the box, I didn't buy it. Unless it was something that I already knew I liked. Like I think I had Super Off-Road or something, but I really didn't, have the what was it called? The multi-tap? Or what was it called on this system?
It's the 4-score.
The 4-score, yes. I'm sorry. Multi-tap was TurboGrafx. Look at me. Anyway, I didn't have one, so I didn't really worry about those 4-player games. I had friends that had them, and they had some 4-player games, and I definitely tried them. But, as soon as I saw a 4-player on the box, I kind of assumed it wasn't a game for me. And so, aside from the fact that it also said LJN on the box, which also meant it probably wasn't a game for anybody, the fact that it had 4 players as a feature, I was not interested. We're not going to introduce the characters of Freddy and Jason, the main enemies of these two franchises. If for some reason you're listening to this podcast, you don't know who they are, I'd like to meet you because I don't know where you've been living, but look it up online. Assuming that you do know these characters, then, you may not know exactly why LJN is such a red flag for gaming, but I remember as a kid, anytime I bought a game that turned out to be not even just licensed, but just kind of a garbagey, thrown together, slapped together game, it probably had an 80% chance of being an LJN game. I own TNC Surf Designs, which I remember as being really good, but play it again now. It's not really good. It is. It's kind of two different, really poorly made games that, I guess you thought was cool because you're a gorilla surfing, but a cat surfing, but it was not good. And I had Gotcha, which is one of the worst gun games that's ever been made. They made Karate Kid. They put out Jaws, the Back to the Future game. They put out licensed garbage. And I'm sure there are some great LJN games. Perhaps these are two of them. The X-Men game on Nintendo was LJN, which may be the worst Nintendo game I've ever played. So I did not get excited when I saw LJN on a game. LJN it's a toy company founded in 1970 by Jack Friedman. LJN actually is the backwards initials of the financial backer of the company, Norman J. Lewis, so LJN is just his initials backwards. They really were always focused, even as a toy company, on licenses. So, they made E.T. toys, they made different dolls and figures. They're all based on different movie and TV properties. That's what the company did. And for toys, that makes a whole lot of sense. But then when they went into video games, they didn't change that business model at all. They knew it would sell. You put a name of a G.I. Joe or whatever the thing is you want on there, if you can get the license and make the game, even if the game is just garbage, kids will buy it. And LJN was known for some of the worst licensed property games known to man. and Friday the 13th, unfortunately, in my memory, is maybe a perfect example of a game, as I recall it, that was really, really, it sold on the source material, but when you actually got into the game, from what I remembered of it, which again, years ago, no instruction manual, was I ran around and threw rocks at zombies until Jason killed me. And that happened over and over again, and I was not impressed. So that's LJN. Later on, they were actually absorbed by Acclaim, and then, at some point even Acclaim vanished. So LJN is no longer around. But that's why LJN, when you hear about it, there's a lot of games. You brought up the Angry Video Game Nerd. You could probably put every game ever made by LJN and search it and find a video that they put out about one of those games.
Yeah, and it's weird because I don't know how I avoided just the majority of their games on the NES. The only one I ever played was Jaws, and that was it. That was literally all the LJN. But it's kind of crazy, like how many games they actually put out on that system. I mean, if it was a licensed movie or a toy, it was LJN. And it's really weird because, like, you mentioned toys and things like that, but then at the same time, this is Jason. This is Friday the 13th. This isn't a toy or something that a child would have. It just seemed that they were, if anything, was on this system that was a licensed product. It was going to be LJN.
So the first of these games that came out in 1989 in the U.S., and that's Friday the 13th. Since it came out in 1989, and based on the game itself, you can assume that most of the source material is the first 4 Friday the 13th movies. It actually would have come out right after Friday the 13th Part 7 with which is basically versus Firestarter. But that's not in this game. It's really just focused on camp counselors fighting against Jason, who shows up and they find an assortment of weapons to fight him while he tries to kill them and other kids in the camp. This game may have, and I stress this, the worst instruction manual that's ever been written by man. It's a long instruction manual.
I have no recollection of this manual.
It's well worth looking. If you're going to play this game, first, go find the instruction manual in PDF or buy the game and get an instruction manual if you choose to do that. I would not recommend that. But if you do that, read the manual and then play the game, and you'll see that almost nothing that you've read in that manual matters. None of it really tells you what to do. It doesn't even really specify when you can do certain things. So the game starts, and the first thing you see is Jason's mask. And then the screen flashes and a dagger flies in, and all of a sudden it shows Friday the 13th and press start. That's it. Mm-hmm. It's a great intro. I have to give it credit for that. Yeah. I love it for that. It's just literally, this is what you're going to get. And when you push start, it shows you a map of Camp Crystal Lake, which is the camp from all the Friday the 13th, the early Friday the 13th movies. And, you pick one of 6 camp counselors. Now, nothing in the book and nothing on this screen will tell you there's any difference in these camp counselors. And generally, I mean, they can all do the same things. It's not like, playing Maniac Mansion where each of these guys has a different skill. Mm-hmm. Oh, one of them can use telephones and one of them can fix computers. Nothing like that. They all do the same thing. They jump and they throw rocks. But some of them jump higher than others. Some of them are faster than others. It turns out that in order to acquire items in this game, some of the characters can acquire items at a faster rate. None of that anywhere in the manual. And I don't know if you'd figure out, you can figure out someone jumps higher than the other person because you have eyes. Mm-hmm. But other than that, I don't know if most of the things that are different from the characters you would notice at all, even if you were playing this for a whole weekend, because I certainly didn't.
Yeah, it wasn't until, aside, little things like that, like a little bit of one character, a couple characters are a little faster, and the jumping. But aside from that, it would be years later until I properly knew that, there were some characters people regard, 2 characters mostly. one male, one female character people regard as, like must use characters on there, the ones you have to keep alive. And there are a couple characters on there people regard as just being completely worthless. Apparently, there's a lot more stats to these characters than I knew about until I really started to dive into this game many years after the fact.
And see, I came into this game blind. I didn't really look anything up. I looked at the instructions, but like Jeremy P mentioned, there's not really much there that can help you. Mm-hmm. It really is just kind of putting you into this game blind. I had no clue that anyone was better than the other person. And I mean, to me, just going through it and playing it, everyone kind of seems just as useless as the other person, anyone else. I'm not really sure. I picked several different people, and they just all kind of seemed like they were shit. But it kind of sucks, that they would put this much into like differentiating these characters, and at least not letting in some form, put something in the instructions to let somebody know, because it's not easy. Even just playing it, like I said, it's kind of hard to tell that these are different characters that have different stats.
Well, even just a skill bar, or it's only four things we're really talking about, jumping, throwing. There are characters that can throw items a little faster than the other. I mean, all these it's four stats that really matter. Just make a bar, A, B, C, D, whatever. Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of games that do that, and you could have put it on that summary screen, but whatever. Aside from which camp counselor you can start to pick from, you can pick of any of the 6. It shows you which of the houses they're in and where you'd start on the map if you use them. It shows you a total of the campers that are left. The game starts with 15 campers that are not counselors, obviously, that you have to stop Jason from killing. If all the campers die, or if all the counselors die, because then he'll just kill all the campers, the game ends. So after you pick your counselor, the game takes you immediately to outside of the cabin that it shows you on the map that they're in, and you're in a 2D side-scrolling mode where, just like in all the movies, you run left and right while zombies appear out of the ground and birds fly at you, and you throw them with rocks at them. I mean, that's what all the movies were about, I'm pretty sure. It's been a while since I've seen them all, but I'm pretty sure the movies revolved around throwing rocks at zombies.
And we'll talk about this more with our next game on this episode. But yeah, I guess I was bewildered by this as a kid, but I guess it's the trouble with adapting a movie where there is one villain who obviously you can't fight, right at the beginning of the game, and then that's the end. But yeah, I guess they did the best they could with the possible enemies they could have put out there. I mean, Friday the 13th we'll talk about it a little more with Nightmare on Elm Street. I think there's a little more leeway with that one. But Friday the 13th, I mean, it's not like Jason. Yeah, he works alone. There's nothing else out there in those woods for the most part. So yeah, I guess the zombies are just something that I just have always had to just kind of overlook. They're in there for video game's sake.
And that's really what it is. I mean, they had to work with what they had to do. For as much as shit as this game gets, someone walked into this office and was like, make a game out of Jason. And how do you do that? Back in the late 80s, it's just what do you have to work with to make a kid's game on the NES? And for, like you said, you've got Jason. You can't kill him. He's the main person that you have to build the game around. So you can't just make him the first boss. But there's not much else in those movies that you can really just throw into that game to make enemies out of.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as generic as it is, yes, I mean, that's just kind of what they had to do.
Except, I mean, they're in the woods at a camp. You could do what every other game does and have snakes or a bear or whatever animal. Wolves. I mean, there are wolves in this game, but they're in a cave. I mean, there's definitely the option to have wild animals because you're at a camp. I guess if you're going to go from the movies, I guess those zombies could be the random homeless men who yell at you to go away from the camp, but they don't. Yes. You don't have to hit them with rocks. But either way, I guess you got to fill the screen with something. I could deal with zombies; it's not a big deal. Other than the fact that you're supposed to stop Jason, otherwise, what's the point of this game? You really don't have any direction at all. The manual tells you nothing, other than that you have this is the items you can find, and here's some people you can play as, and here's some monsters you'll fight. And that's all it tells you, really. The game, when you first start it, I did forget to mention this, does give you one direction. Before you actually get to start playing, after you pick your camper, it says the sentence fragment, use the torch to light the fireplaces. So on your map,
they've screwed you from the fucking start.
Well, yeah, they don't give you a lot of guidance. You're supposed to light fireplaces. First off, where are these fireplaces, and how do I light them? The map itself will show you there's a bunch of small houses and large houses. And if you go to the large houses, that's where the fireplaces are. There are 7 of them around the map itself, and there are, I think, 9 or 10 of the smaller houses. Your campers are always in smaller houses. The larger houses are, they just have the fireplaces, and sometimes Jason will hide in them. But basically, you're supposed to kill these zombies outside for a set number of zombies. It's not a large number. It's 2 or 3 or 4. But after you've killed the prerequisite number of zombies, which take 3 rocks, I want to say, to kill each zombie, one will drop a lighter. Once they drop that lighter, you pick it up. And additionally, once you get a lighter, it means you can jump around like a crazy person and find other items. So you'll walk around the street jumping and throwing rocks at zombies until eventually you jump and you find a dagger, or you'll find a key, or you'll find, I want to say the other item is, potions. Potions.
Yeah, you got your little potions too. But the jumping around it's a great early game tactic, but it's something that could completely screw you over later on in the game. Just not to get too far ahead, but there are better weapons you can find, and there are very convoluted ways to go about getting these weapons, and it's no small feat to stumble upon some of the better weapons in the game. But it's that thing where you're jumping around, maybe trying to get some potions or a key, and if you just happen to blindly, and it's going to be a blind jump into that dagger, that weapon that you spent all that time trying to pick up is now gone. There's no option. Do you want to switch between this and this? You don't automatically keep the best weapon. You can drop back down to that basic dagger pretty easy on accident. And then if you want that weapon back that you had, you have to just completely retrace your steps from there.
Or in some cases, you can't. There are some weapons you cannot.
In some cases, you've got your one shot at it, and too bad after that.
The other part of that I didn't realize at all, and again, this is nowhere in the manual, and I'm impressed that people have figured this out, because if you play this game for 10 minutes and decide you want to figure out all the ins and outs and intricacies of this game, you need better hobbies. But there are a finite number of these items. So, you're jumping around looking for potions, but essentially there's only like 10 potions in the game. And if you jump and grab them, then they're gone. If you jump and they appear and you walk away, they'll stay. But how would you know that? Because it's not like they make any sense. It's not like if you jump in certain spots where there's like a hollowed out tree or something that all of a sudden you can find a potion in it. I mean, it's just like you feel like you're jumping around at random and they just show up in the air and you grab them. But it's a finite number of these things. So that's the other part you can screw yourself, is you can jump around the beginning and grab, as one character, one counselor, all the daggers. Well, now no one else can ever grab a dagger.
Yeah.
Like the only thing that apparently you can get over and over again is the lighters, because you get those after you kill X number of zombies. So the beginning of the game, in theory, you're supposed to go to all of these houses, the large houses, to use your lighter to light the fireplaces. Now, you're not going to be able to do that easily, because pretty much as soon as you start the game, there's like a siren alert noise, and either you're one of the counselors or some of the campers are currently being attacked by Jason. So you have to wander around this map, and it's a pretty... On the map screen, the map makes a lot of sense. When you look at it on the map screen, you're like, okay, I see there's a big circle around the entire camp, and then there's a little circle around a cave, and a little circle around a lake. So I should be able to figure out how to get to these cabins. The map itself might be... And once you figure it out, I guess it's not that bad. But when you first get to where you have to go into one of the inner circles of the map, it like inverses everything. It turns it around. So on the map, you'll be going to the right to go clockwise or counterclockwise. I'm sorry, right to go counterclockwise. But if you go in the inner circles, if you go right, you're going clockwise. It inverts the way you're going in these circles. And I guess you could tell that if you look at the way the road looks that you come in from. It kind of lets you know, oh, okay, if I'm looking at the map and the road is at the bottom of the screen, then obviously left is right and right is left, or whatever the deal. Mm-hmm. But I promise you I didn't figure that out when I was a kid. And I certainly still had problems with it now. Even more so, there are 2 forests and a set of caves. And in those areas, it's 1,000 times worse. Because not only do you not have an overhead map for reference, but it doesn't seem to make any sense at all how those areas work. But let's not even talk about those areas. The standard map, where you get to see it to find the house to get to where Jason is, you have 60 seconds, and you have to find your way around the map with your current counselor to get to where Jason is. Now, I didn't know that you could change counselors.
Yes.
The only way to change counselors is to go into one of the small houses. And then when you go into one of the houses, the view switches to almost a first-person kind of mode. It reminds me a lot of the Goonies 2 in-house, where there's like a set of commands on the right, and you can see the screen in front of you. But unlike Goonies 2, you're not just using items in there. You actually do have to fight Jason on occasion. It does come to an action sequence that comes in those screens. But still, you have 4 commands in there, and one is change. I thought that only worked when you were in the cabin with another counselor. It lets you switch to them, which is all it does when you're in one of those cabins. But if you're in a small cabin by yourself, you can hit change, and it takes you back to the map screen. You can pick a new counselor, preferably one who's close to wherever Jason is. I'm going to be honest, up until 5 minutes before this podcast, I didn't know you could do that.
So I'm so fucking mad that I just found that out myself, because
you upped your game. Now when you guys go back to play it, because I know you're going to go back to play it, you've got this new technique you can use. Yeah, it's the best way for traversing this map, and you can kind of put your counselors sort of strategically kind of around, so you can do a little. It's I guess the game's version of fast travel, for just for lack of better terms. Because you really have got to hustle to get to those cabins, and it always seems like the counselor you have just happens to be so far away. But yeah, you have to get there to rescue these kids. It's not necessary to rescue all of them. I believe you can go down to as far as 1 left alive at the end of the game. But yeah, you're going to want to try to keep them alive, because not only are you having to deal with Jason, in the cabin, but you can also have just random encounters out on the path as you're walking, and you're going to want that, because you're going to have to face him 3 times, because the game is essentially divided up into 3 different days, and each day the enemies, I don't think anybody ever does any more damage to you as far as the zombies and whatnot, but I did notice they do get faster. But Jason is really going to pick up the pace, and it's kind of strategic as to where you want to fight him at, whether you want it to be in the cabin or if you want it to be out on the trail. So, there's a lot of little ins and outs to this. And the caves that we touched on a little bit before, we'll talk about as we go along, are definitely worth making at least a couple of trips into for some items you can't quite find anywhere else. And as a kid, I had to pick up a couple of these items were the only way I could really ever finish Jason off.
Well, I apparently wasted way too much time with. I didn't know that you could actually switch like that. So I was just, anytime it was saying that Jason was at a certain cabin or somewhere, I was just using the character that I had to try to traverse this goddamn map and get to the point where Jason was, and that was impossible, almost to the point where this seems like something that you should just figure out and know before you start playing the game, which there's a lot of things about this game that seems like you should just know before you start playing the game that would make life way easier. And I didn't know any of this stuff. So yeah, I wasted a hell of a lot of fucking time running around that goddamn trail.
And not just do you need to get there in 60 seconds or the person dies. The longer it takes you to get to the counselor or the kids, counselors will lose life. If you take 30 seconds, a counselor's down to half life on their life bar. So your life bar does not recover until you kill Jason that first day or until you use potions. And the potions are what? Maybe a fifth of your life. I mean, if you're lucky.
Oh, it's laughable at best.
It's a smidge of life that you get to fill people with, and knowing that you only have a finite number of those things, which I didn't know. That's even worse. I mean, I thought it was unlimited. I just was, after a while it's harder to find them. But no, there's like 12. To put a better point on what you're saying, Jeremy, about how things are not defined. For example, the fact that Billy just threw out, oh yeah, you got to kill him 3 times and it's broken out in 3 days. That's never explained any place. Never.
No, that was something I found out years later. I know you had to have. I know I just coincidentally fought him a few times. I really. There's nothing there to tell you it's over a 3-day span. That was just knowledge picked up well after the fact.
Well, and when you fight Jason the first couple times, or handful of times, in the cabins, you go to wherever he is, or you switch to another character that's nearby, you save the kids or the counselor that's there, you walk through the cabin, and you have to find Jason in that cabin, which you don't think would be hard with a 2-room cabin, but you have to face every wall. But once you find Jason, he challenges you to a fight, which is not hard once you learn that you can duck, which is in the manual, to be fair. Yeah. But I never knew that. No, I knew it, but I couldn't do it consistently. I think I just never bothered reading the instructions. But that part is actually explained. But you basically dodge a bunch of Jason's attacks, then throw rocks or a dagger or whatever item you have at him enough times that he will, flash and run away. And his life bar goes down a tiny bit. Let's say he has 20 points in his life bar. You might do 1 or 2 in that encounter, and he runs off. Next time you fight Jason that same day, he'll start at wherever he left off. So he'll start with 18 or 16. So eventually you do get to the point where on that first day where his life bar goes low enough where he'll just fight you to the death. Yeah. And he does a lot of damage when he hits you, but especially the first day, it's pretty easy to dodge his attacks. And if you can just kind of follow him around the map, every time he attacks a camper or whatever and switch to the other people, you can kill Jason that first day, which, again, until this podcast, I had never killed Jason. And once I killed Jason the first time, and it started what was equivalent to day 2, even though it doesn't really say this is day 2 of whatever, it's just like, oh, Jason's back, he's stronger. Like, what the fuck? Yeah. I was so mad because I thought I had finished the game. I was like, I finally beat this motherfucker. It took years, and all of a sudden it's like, no, you didn't beat him. In fact, he's way tougher now. I'm like,
This is where day 2 is kind of where the strategy kicks in, because I cannot beat this son of a bitch in the cabin besides day 1. His attacks are a little slower. You can get more hits in. Day 2, he starts this kind of combo, and I just can't dodge the thing. But fortunately, you can kind of. Apparently, he has a set path. I was not aware of this. A path that he works. This was something I just found out because I would just walk the map, and sometimes you can just happen to bump into him out on the the regular side scrolling portion of the game, and it is a lot easier to take him out on there. And in fact, when he takes 6 or 7 hits and tries to run, you can continue to run also in his direction, continue chasing him down, continue chipping away at his health, and if you're quick enough, you can take him out pretty fast. And that's just the way you have to do it the other 2 days. But on day 1, there's an option. This is completely optional. You can go the entire game without stepping in to the cave, and there's a door there, and you can fight. Remember this from the movie where you fought the animated severed head of Jason's mother? You can fight it. I always found it to be a pretty easy fight. It has just kind of a little back and forth swooping pattern, and you can get some pretty strong items from it. And one of which is I guess the strongest item in the game. I've only had this thing a couple times, and that's the pitchfork. The torch, I think, works just fine. And there's a couple ways of getting the torch. I know one is to light all the fireplaces.
No, that doesn't give you a torch. That gives you a flashlight.
Ah, that's right. The flag,
When you
which
light
is fucking
all the
useless.
yes, when you finally waste your
Yes.
time and light all the goddamn fireplaces, the last time you light one, you get a flashlight.
Yes,
And what that
the
flashlight
it-
does,
it lights up the background of the caves.
yes, and that's how you
to
find
show
the
hidden
other
doors,
passages,
which are
yes.
already very obvious. You don't need this because there's a definite difference in the rocks leading in the pathway to these hidden doors. So chances are you're going to tap up on the controller anyway to try to walk into it. The pitchfork you get on day 3 with Jason's mother. Day 2, you get the sweater, which is pretty good. I mean, it's a little callback to the movies, where a female character would try to assume the role of Jason's mother to slow him down or to try to fool him while somebody comes in for a death blow. Whatever counselor you win that battle with to get the sweater, it's got to be your good counselor, because you can't trade this item. And it's on that counselor, and I think it takes them down to half damage.
Yes.
From Jason,
From
which is pretty
everything.
damn useful, especially in the later days. Honestly, I always just try to get the sweater and the torch, and I find the torch takes a bar of Jason's health per hit. And if you meet him out on the trail, you can light him up pretty good. It's just once again, I mean, the ultimate thing with this game is, how would you have known? How would you possibly know? The battle with Jason's mother, I stumbled upon by accident when I was a kid. I didn't even know it was there. It wasn't even the first time I rented the game. But it's exciting because, I mean, I fucking love this game. I can't hide it. I've hidden my hand long enough. I still think this is a decent game. I just think that it's so fucking confusing and could stand to deliver information a little bit better. Have a fucking crazy old man dropping you fucking hints here and there. I mean, there's so much to do in this game.
Yeah,
you could play through and never even know about.
We didn't even mention the forests. There are 2 forests.
Yes.
Like in the caves, there are also mazes. When you figure your way through those, you get to a cabin. There's a locked door. That's what those keys are for. You unlock the cabin, and most of the time you'll find a weapon in there. I think the default is a machete, but you can find notes in the cabins, and they're pretty basic notes that'll say things. I wrote some of them down because they're such intricate hints. I don't want to lose it. You'll go to one that says, go into one of the cabins by the lake, and you find a cabin by the lake, and it says, go into the woods. You go into the woods, and if you have those, you can find another, I think in one of the cabins in the woods, you'll find a note that says something like, there's a machete in Hut 3, or something like that. And you basically need to find these notes to get some of the better weapons early. That's how you get the torch early.
Yeah.
All these things that we're talking about, it makes it sound like this game is organized and something you can follow. Billy, I am more than impressed that before this podcast, you knew how to play this game. Because I have tried this game over the years several times. And again, I knew how to fight Jason in cabins. I knew how to get at least the dagger. I think I got the machete once by accident, because you can get that from killing... from the woods, kind of by accident if you're just grabbing notes and looking for it. So, I mean, I knew there were better weapons. In the book, it tells you can get a pitchfork and a torch and other things, but an axe. The only one I ever got was the machete, and I came close to killing Jason, but never did. So, the fact that, I never ran into Jason's mom, that's something that's in the game, and I never would have found it. I never went into those caves because it looks like it's a maze, and I hate mazes, especially in a game where the basic map that it gives you and it lays out feels like a maze because of how you have to make sure that you're turning the right way. And while you're in both the cave and the woods, the whole time you're there, you keep getting sirens that Jason's attacking people outside of the woods and the cave. So even if you were like, I'm going to spend this playthrough mapping out the caves, you've probably lost your entire game while you're doing it. And you still haven't really mapped out the caves as far as I can tell, because I know you just said you don't need to know, you don't need the flashlight to see where those backgrounds were, but I certainly do. I don't know how I can't tell them apart. I can't.
Yeah, I mean, it's subtle, and it's probably because I can't put myself in my shoes at that time back then when I first started playing through. But yeah, there's, little rocks along the trail, and you will find a couple rocks that are just cracked. And I imagine the first time I just said, what the hell? Let's just push up on them. And yeah, you get on through. But learning the ins and outs of this game was not something done at the time of this game's release. This is one of those ultimate fucking just around school fucking hearsay type things. Oh, this person found this person found that. Not like everybody in fucking school was playing it. I'm talking about like the 3 kids in school that were playing the damn game, just exchanging information. And it wouldn't be until much later when I sat down as an adult and played this that I, found other little things here and there, some things by accident, and just some getting online just to, I would find something new, and it's like, well, shit, if it's fucking 20 years later and I'm just now finding this, what else is in here? So, yeah, it's a game with a lot of little secrets to it, a lot of items, and a lot of areas. And I haven't encountered a game like that where there's so much stuff in it. And, people that played this back in the late 80s, early 90s and played through the game are still surprised by, some of the shit in this thing. And it just goes to show just kind of how poorly put together this thing is. I mean, it's just fucking, it has the budget of some of those fucking early Friday the 13th films. It's barely holding together.
So are we saying that this is the Dark Souls of NES games?
No, it's not the Dark Souls of NES games. Because Dark Souls, yes, it doesn't give you a lot of guidance, but it certainly tells you how to play the game, and it certainly tells you, where to go at the start, and yeah, you have a couple branching paths, but it's still not. This is unintelligible. Even with a fact that tells you what to do, like then you're like, okay, this makes a lot of sense. But this is the kind of game someone, they must have loved the movie so much. Like, here's what I want to do in a movie. They got all this stuff written out, and then they just let someone else write the instruction manual, and it does not tell you what to do. It reminds me a lot of not in gameplay, but remember, did anyone ever have the Indiana Jones game for the Atari 2600?
Yes.
No.
Yes, I totally remember playing. Yes, I
No.
know.
So it was an exploration, like treasure hunting game. It is. I mean, I knew how to finish it, and I don't know how because I didn't learn it the right way. Like, I had a friend that must have had a guide, or maybe it told you in the instruction manual. I have no idea. That game is a bunch of screens of random colored blocks and stuff, and you're supposed to, like, fall down certain pits and make sure you put certain items in certain rooms. And I don't know how anyone ever figured it out, but we knew how to do it, and we were like, oh, this game is great. Look how involved it is. It's just like the movie. But then it's not a fun game. It is a game where someone tells you what to do, you can see how to progress through it, but you're never going to figure it out on your own. And in this game, it feels like it's a little too tedious with the amount of times you have to do the same things over and over and over again. It's not like you can spend all 3 days to make sure you get the best weapons and items and fight Jason, because you're constantly going back to chase him down to a cabin to stop him from killing a counselor and fighting him for a couple hits, and then he runs off. And you do the same thing over and over again while you slowly try to get through the map. And eventually, either you can get the right items and kill him on day 3, or you're just not going to get those items because you're busy chasing him around, and he's going to just smoke you on day 2. That's what happened to me this time.
It's really the downfall of this game. It's the thing, and even though I like this game, it's the thing that takes a lot of the fun out of it is just the constant alarms. And I just think it would have been a lot more fun, and it would have been a lot easier if you just had the freedom and the time to, kind of just explore, at your leisure. And, and just, you just have to worry about keeping your counselors alive and the whole thing with having to save the kids, which is hardly ever a thing in the Friday the 13th films. I mean, it always is conveniently, just the counselors there the night before, the camp's opening or something like that. But yeah, it's just, it really, it takes a hit because of that, because it's just such an annoyance. And for such a kind of in-depth, I mean, it's fucking not well explained, but it's pretty in-depth amount of things you can do in this game. They really don't give you a lot of time to do it.
Yeah, no, it's certainly in-depth, but to the point where if you mess any of those things up, you've thrown away your chances of finishing the game.
Oh, you've got to run a tight ship.
Yeah,
when you play through this thing.
And without any guidance, anyone who beat this game when it was new, without knowing someone who made the game, I'm thoroughly impressed. But also, there were many better games to play at that time. So yeah, Billy, I don't know how you can stand by this, but you know what? Maybe, just maybe, the other game we're going to talk about today is a better game, which is Nightmare on Elm Street. also for the Nintendo.
Oh man, I was so fucking excited for this one. I don't know what magazine it was, probably Game Players or Game Pro at the time, had a little ad for this game, and I remember seeing that, and I was fucking thrilled because this was a series. Nightmare on Elm Street. This was a series that just played around my house constantly. It's all my parents watched. Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, all that. Fucking, my folks were huge on it, so it was always on the TV. So I grew up watching it, and to know there was a video game coming out, and at the time to not know how movie adaptations of video games turned out, yeah, I was super excited. And I remember picking this one up. This was not just a rental. This was a purchase pretty quickly after renting it a time or two. And I just remember sitting there and loving this, and all my friends were excited. And we had that friend with the 4 score. We got together. We played 4 players on this thing, and I'll talk about how that goes as we move along. But yeah, this was one I was definitely a lot more excited for this one than Friday the 13th, just because I just love the series a lot more.
And again, going into it blind, I started out with Friday the 13th. I'd never played that game before, and I didn't grow up with it, so it's not something I really want to learn the intricacies for. Wasn't really into it, and I did not know what to expect with this one. So I've never, I've always, like I said, I've never been a big fan of horror movies because of anxiety and things like that. But I was interested to see what they would do with this game based on what they did with the previous game. Because this, as much as you can kind of talk shit about Friday the 13th, it did a lot of things differently. It wasn't just trying to be a straight-on side-scrolling platforming game. I mean, it was basically, but it had a lot more to it. It was obvious that they wanted to do more with that game than just be the standard game, regardless of if they're successful or not. So I wanted to see what they did with Nightmare on Elm Street, which definitely kind of is more of the standard right-to-left action platform game that we've covered all the time on this channel. But they did totally kind of do a little bit more with it than just what you would expect with that kind of movie-based game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, compared to Friday the 13th, which it has a lot of layers like an onion. This game does not. I mean, this game is definitely more of a standard. This is what I expected from an LJN platformer. It's got the themes that make sense with the movie, but especially the very beginning, you walk down the street as whoever you're supposed to be, Tommy. I don't know who you'd be in this game. You walk down the street through you see a bunch of houses where the doors are closed and somewhere they're open. So you go into the first house with an open door, and all of a sudden you're going through what kind of feels like a Castlevania level, a simple older Castlevania level, but instead of in-depth involved fighting, you're just kind of punching things and grabbing bones. And there's a collector at the top of the screen, a collector count that shows how many bones are left in the area. Once you've collected all the bones, you find the door to the basement or the area to the opening to the next area. Sometimes it's a staircase up, sometimes it's a staircase down. It takes you through another level, and some of the later levels have many layers of that to find. Eventually, you get to the last one of those floors. You collect a number of bones, and you will fight an incarnation of Freddy. And the first level is the best, not the best example, but one of the ones where it's like, oh, this is kind of cool. It's his glove, the claw glove that you think of. It's a giant version of the glove, and it shoots across the room on an arm made of weird balls, but an arm anyway. And you just have to make sure you punch the glove before it hits you, and you do enough hits to it, you can see its life bar goes down, and it goes away, and he dissolves. You get a key, which allows you to open one of the locked doors in another house, and you go to another house, you do the same thing. In the basics of what each level is, that's it. You collect bones.
Yeah.
Once you've gotten all the bones, you go to another floor, collect all the bones. Eventually, you get to Freddy. In some version, you fight Freddy, and that's the end of that level. I think there's 6 or 7 houses or areas you go into total. You go from, I think, 3 houses and then into what is it? The
high school.
Oh yeah, well, the high school is towards the end, so it's you definitely do a couple houses. Then there's Freddy's house. Then you go to the junkyard, and I think you go through a church, like an old church, and then you go to the high school. So either way, it's like 6 or 7 levels that are all basically the same kind of gameplay, where you collect bones, you dodge what start out to be things like bats and rats and the things you'd expect to find in an old house, big spiders. But what I thought was your health bar at the top of the screen is not your health bar. It's your, sleepiness bar? I don't know what you call it. Your sleep meter. And as it goes down to 0, unless you grab coffee or other things to keep you awake, you all of a sudden the game will switch to a nightmare mode, much like that first level of Monster Party, where it switches from day to evil mode, except unlike that, the game doesn't switch back after that level, and it's not just a cool gimmick. Instead, things become much harder. All those monsters transform into harder versions of those monsters. But you can find 3 different power-ups that turn you from a normal kid that just punches enemies into one of 3 different Dream Warrior forms. There's a ninja, a gymnast, and a wizard.
Yes.
So this is obviously based on, Nightmare on Elm Street's 3 and 4, I guess.
It's pretty heavily on 3.
I think 4 is just because
the
you're
plot
one
of 3 was finding Freddy's bones and giving them a proper burial or whatnot.
Right, and that's the goal of this
that's
game.
where you had the people with the dream powers. You had the wizard master and all the others. So I was really excited because Nightmare 3 has long been my favorite. From the time it came out, still to today. I think it's kind of the height of the series. It was exciting that they were able to I know what they were going for, and it's pretty impressive that you can actually walk the length of Elm Street. And there are, locations from the film. You have a church, you have the school, you have the junkyard, which is, from 3 and 4. And the end, the reasons they look like they do on the inside defy all logic in the waking world. But yeah, I just thought it was nice that they tried to do that. Tried to give you a kind of an Elm Street to walk up and down as you're going in and out of the damn place, fucking collecting and fucking like Randy Travis digging up bones as you go along. Fucking, it was, I don't know. I like it. I still do. I just have to say it can get a little difficult because of the bone. It's just like a really small, plain white sprite, and sometimes it kind of blends in a bit much. And there's nothing more painful than fucking traversing one of these levels, getting to the end of that trap door, and you can't get down. And you look up, and you're missing one fucking bone. And you proceed to just go back and forth. And it's not long levels. You can keep going back and forth, and just not find the damn thing. And I encountered that a couple times, and it is just maddening when it gets to that point.
Yeah, the first couple of levels, I actually started out enjoying this game because it's just, it's very much just a straight up kind of action platformer, and you're going through they're collecting these bones. And like you said, these bones are just straight. They look like chicken bones, just hanging out in the stage. But there's a lot of times where they do just blend into that background, and there's a good amount of times where I picked up a bone like going downstairs, and it would make the sound effect that you picked up a bone. I'm like, oh, I didn't even know there was a bone there. Mm-hmm. And then later in the game, some of those levels kind of get a little long, and if you make it to the last area, the part where you have to continue on, if you're missing 1 or 2, you have to go all the way back through that level to figure out where the hell you missed those. Mm-hmm. And it could be, fairly close, or it could be all the way back at the beginning of the level that that was probably my biggest complaint with the game. It's not so much that it's a bad game. It's just it gets kind of tedious, like going back and forth trying to find where you might have missed those bones, because sometimes it can very much feel like one of those where's Waldo kind of things. Like it just kind of blends in with the background.
Well, and it's not just that the levels get harder because they get longer or the enemies get tougher necessarily. Even starting with, I want to say, the third house, although it may have even started in the second house. Not only do you have monsters that are placed throughout the level, like a Castlevania, but you also start getting monsters that constantly spawn, much like the bats or Medusa heads in the Castlevania games. And they come at you pretty much constantly. And when you jump, they do knock you back. And when you fall, you do die. And yes, you get a fair number of lives, and I think you get unlimited continues. And the continues let you start right where you died from. So especially, since it does have a multiplayer component where I'm assuming you all play together, that makes it more fun. But it meant that, yes, it was challenging and yes, it was annoying, but ultimately I felt like I just kept continuing over and over and over again. I don't think there was ever a limit to those continues. At least that I could see, there wasn't.
Oh, no, I don't think so. I think you're free to continue on as often as you want.
So my point is, this is a game where you do the same thing over and over and over again. The only difference in these levels, other than that there are more enemies and they're longer, is that the Freddy version you fight at the end of every level is a different version of Freddy. You get the glove by itself with a hand, then you get a glove that kind of flies around the room. You get Freddy's head and a glove. I think he becomes like a weird ghost-looking thing. And then there are some where you actually fight the man Freddy as he runs around. And those are all cool. And I'm not saying that's not fun. But at some point, that's the only reason to get through the level, is to see what version of Freddy you fight at the end. And none of them are necessarily that different. They're all little enough to fly around the screen or run around the screen, and you just... I did not finish this game, so if anyone did, good for you. I don't think it's impossible since you can continue indefinitely. I just got bored. But eventually, you use the ninja form or whatever, and you just jump kick your way to victory. And it seems like it takes a lot more hits than would make any sense to do those fights, considering they're so repetitive and generally not very difficult. Especially if you can continue your way and stay exactly the progress you've made. You can just kind of throw yourself at it like a hammer and eventually finish it. So I think that this game does have some good ideas, and I like that you can go back and forth from the dream to the waking world. Like if you're in the dream world and you find a radio, it plays and it wakes you up. That's kind of a cool idea. There's a lot of neat little nuggets in this game, but the basics of the game, I think, are real simple. And I think that makes sense for a 4-player game, actually, where you're just going to play with a bunch of people and just kind of not randomly, but just run through this maze as pure chaos and just see who gets the most points at the end. But as far as being a fun single-player, action with some puzzle elements, kind of, or at least some strategy elements, I think this is pretty bare bones.
It's not a game you're going to quit because it's difficult. It's a fatigue is going to set in if you're not really enjoying it or not wanting to play through. Yeah, you get to play through just to kind of see, what the next Freddy form might be, or what if the next fight's going to differ a little bit. You're going to find out that the forms are neat, for the time, and they tried to kind of go with some things from the movies. I think this is where there's kind of Freddy has the advantage over Jason as far as he's presented himself in so many forms in the films that and with the dream world there's certainly a lot more to work with there. But yeah, you're going to get one single player unless you're really enjoying yourself, and if you've played through it before, you're just going to get kind of wore out, I think, of just doing the same monotonous task over and over. And I have to say, the 4-player on this thing is worth it for the experience. It's probably a lot easier to do nowadays online, getting 4 people together. I found it. The only problem was that this thing flickers like a son of a bitch when you've got 4 people on that screen. It's almost unbearable. It really works it over as far as the flicker and as far as slowing down a little bit. You can imagine this game already flickers a little bit to begin with, but then throw 4 characters on there just running, jumping around everywhere. And and I remember it just being very confusing. I remember dying a lot more when we had 4 people rather than whenever I played by myself. Still it's fun because I didn't play many 4-player games at the time, so I was still taken aback by the gimmick of the whole thing. But yeah, it's holds a special place with me. I enjoy the game, but I mean, I can get on there and play through it pretty quick. If you're playing it and if you're playing through that first level and you don't really care, about the Freddy encounters, you've played the game. You could probably cut it off if you want to, because cut it off and look up the end screen on Google and just call it a day, because it's not going to get any different. There's not going to be a lot of variety. I got to tip my hat to Friday the 13th for at least, kind of keeping things a little bit fresher as you played along. This one it really doesn't have the same longevity, unless it's got one trick, and if you don't like it, then there's not going to be much of a game here for you.
And I did actually play through this one.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't deal with the other one, or the Friday the 13th, but Nightmare on Elm Street, it kind of has that kind of monotonous, do the same thing over and over again, which I am totally a fan of.
Yeah.
And I managed to make it all the way through the end. And we talked a little bit about, or you mentioned the amount of different things that Freddy can become in those nightmares in the movies. Mm-hmm. And it kind of felt a little bit just dumb at some point in this one, where it was like, you've got the hand and you got the mouth, the head, the giant head or whatever, which is cool because he's throwing out his tongue. There's extra tongues you have to kill. That's really neat. But then you get to like Freddy Bat, and it's just a bat flying. It's just Freddy's head as a bat flying around the room. And then at some point it's Freddy Ghost. It's literally just Freddy's head as a ghost flying around the room, which is the exact same as the bat. It's kind of, they could have done a little bit more. I don't know what they could have maybe done, but generally there's a lot. There's definitely a few of those forms that are just repeated, like the head and the hand are just repeated, and the bat and the ghost are repeated. And Freddy at the very end, whenever you do get to that boiler room and fight him in his regular Freddy form, he's literally just walking a few steps and slicing with his claw hands, and then going back and forth and doing the same pattern over and over again.
Yeah, it's a bizarre fight. It's as if he's been blinded. And
he literally seems like he's been flashbanged or something, and he cannot see what he's doing. And you are just you can just go around and hit him whenever you can. There's some like Freddy glove claws coming up from the floor that you have to dodge, but besides that, that's it. And I also have to admit, before you actually get to that just regular Freddy, there is a boss rush. So you have to go through every single one of those other forms, which none of them are very hard, but it's still just one of those things. I got to that boss rush and I was like, of course there's a boss rush. Why wouldn't there be? Because every fucking game we cover, there has to be a boss rush at some point. That's just how it works. But yeah, I mean, it's more of a game that I enjoyed, definitely, in playing through it. The music is unexpectedly really good for one of these games. It's just and whenever you go back to Hell World and then change back, it's like a weird remix of the RC Pro-Am song. It's kind of, because this is Rare made RC Pro-Am. They actually developed this game, which is interesting to think about, that this was a game that Rare actually created. I enjoy this one definitely more than I did Friday the 13th, but still I wouldn't say that it's a great game. There's way too many problems with it. It is very, very repetitive.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a lot more accessible. It's one that you don't have to figure much out. It's kind of laid out there, for you what you're doing, and you get the gist of it. You have that counter up there, and you want to get the counter down to 0. You want to fight these enemies. A lot more easy to just jump into. Whereas Friday the 13th, I think you just stumble along, much like Freddy on that last fight. You just stumble along kind of blindly through that one. But yeah, I both these games, I have a soft spot for them. Have played through them so many times. And yeah, I mean, I will definitely be playing these again. It's not like I play them every year. I mean, I just think about them sometimes and pick them up and play through. They're both Friday the 13th when you kind of know what you're doing on there, and this one are both quick playthroughs. And yeah, I mean, I would recommend if you're a fan of the series, you probably have to. You probably at least have to jump on there, give each one of them a try. You'll find maybe little things, well, especially probably Nightmare, but Friday the 13th a little bit less. You'll find little things from the series that you recognize and little callbacks here and there. If you're not fans of the series, you might take to Nightmare on Elm Street, because I mean it's like Jeremy said, it's more of your standard side scroller. So there's a lot of fun to be had there, and I think these aren't bad games. I think they fall under that problem that, yeah, there was an Angry Video Game Nerd episode about them. So now, even though you haven't played them, you're going to take the stance that they're fucking awful, which I think happens a lot nowadays with the games. Someone says it's bad, so it's got to be, and I'm going to speak on it as if I've played it myself. But that aside, I think if you sat down and actually played them, you'll find they're not good games, but they can be entertaining games. They can be fun in parts. They're certainly not just the fucking shitty ass games I think they get the reputation for being. At least that's my stance on it.
I have to disagree to some level. I do think that specifically Friday the 13th is a bad game. Now, maybe once you know what to do, it's followable, and it's, I'm going to go back now, and I'm going to finish that game. In theory, I may just give up and decide to go back to fight monsters, but I definitely want to finish Friday the 13th just to say I've done it. But I can't do it on my own. Like, I couldn't have just figured this out. Even if the only game I owned from the time I bought a Nintendo until now was Friday the 13th, I probably would not have figured out all the things needed to really finish that game. And that means it's a bad game as far as I'm concerned. Nightmare on Elm Street is a far more accessible game. You don't need the instruction manual. You might not figure out how to use your Dream Warrior powers until eventually you realize, okay, I have to use these things when I'm dreaming. That makes a lot of sense. But otherwise, the game is very simple. You find bones till your bone count goes to 0, then leave the level. And it's very, very simple, to the point where single player, I got bored with it 2 levels in. And I did play more just to see, I want to see what else happens. And then, I was like, let me just look online. And before I waste all my time focused on this game instead of the other, is there a lot more to this game? And the answer is no. Now, the multiplayer ability does mean I would recommend this to anyone who's looking, if you like Nightmare on Elm Street, if you're looking for like a fun 2-player game that, it's kind of mindless, but you are going to see different things. You're going to plow through it. I mean, I definitely spent a lot of nights playing through 2-player games like this with my brother or with friends or whoever. I probably would have finished this game, and I'd probably have better memories of it if I would have bought it when it was new. But I think, man, with the number of other games you can play, even just on the NES, I can't recommend you spend your time on either of these games. They're not, they're just not very well made. Either they are too simple and won't force you to go all the way through to find the most you can out of the game. You can see most of the game in 2 levels in this case of Nightmare on Elm Street. And in the case of Friday the 13th, it's like an endurance challenge just to even kill Jason the first time. And then to know you have to figure out how to map those other areas out, find out how to get certain notes so you can get different weapons at different times. I mean, I'm going to do it to say that I did it, but I just think a game that you have to wait 20 years for an online fact to figure out can't be considered a good game. So if I have to pick one of these two, which I guess is only fair, I'm going to pick Nightmare on Elm Street. But man, that's if I only had those 2 carts, I probably would not be into games. We would not be doing this podcast. I'd be doing something else completely. Maybe I'd be really into soccer. Who knows? These games are not great.
I will say that, it's nice that they at least tried something a little original with both of those games. It's not, they didn't do it well, but it's just not a straightforward piece of shit game like most LJN games are. They they tried to sort of honor what those movies did. The story, the plot of each of those, doing the bones with Nightmare on Elm Street and just going around and trying to kill Jason is pretty close to what those movies were trying to do. And on the NES, it's impressive that that's what they were doing, because they could have just totally cheaped out and made an even worse game, which is hard to imagine. But still, I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt, because it's LJN, it's Halloween. These are the games we've got. They're not as terrible as I was led to believe. Maybe Friday the 13th is, but for the most part, it's not something I would go back to. But it's not as bad as what I was led to believe.
Oh, there's certainly worse games, but still, I mean, these did not hold up. I mean, if that's the point of this podcast, is do these games hold up? The answer is a resounding no, at least on my end. So that's our Freddy vs. Jason. I guess if we had to pick a winner, we've all picked Freddy, or really none of us won. So the games won and took us out. But I'm glad we played them, glad we focused on them, so we never, ever have to do it again. One more thing I wanted to note is, much like Jeremy said, Nightmare on Elm Street was made by Rare. LJN normally used to license out the property and then get someone else to make the game. Friday the 13th made by Atlas, the same company that makes Persona. So both of these companies that made these games have gone to do much, much better things, thankfully. But yeah, I always like finding out who made these old games people may not like. Karate Kid, also Atlas.
That's really weird. I mean, when you go back and look at what they've done, these amazing developers that have gone on to much better things, to think that Rare made Nightmare on Elm Street and Atlas was there making Friday the 13th. It's just really strange to kind of think about where these developers started from.
So now that we've gotten through October, and unfortunately for everybody else on Earth, Red Dead Redemption 2 hits by the time you're hearing this. And that means we've all been playing it since the day it came out. And for the next 2 weeks, in order to play the next game, I'd like to play something that's not going to pull me away from it too much, and also will motivate me, perhaps, to stay in the Western theme. So I think we're going to cover Wild Guns for the Super Nintendo. Might not have a lot to it. I have no idea. I would have said the exact same thing about Friday the 13th until we did this episode, and we talked about it for almost an hour. So we'll find out in 2 weeks. If not, we're going to talk a whole lot about Red Dead Redemption 2. So hopefully everyone else will play along with us on that. But either way, until our next episode, please check us out on retrovania.net. There are links to our Twitter, our Facebook, all our videos on YouTube, and of course episodes of this podcast. And until then, that makes no sense. And we'll see you next time.